What's up, Wonders of London fans? It's me, Vincent, from Wonders of London, and welcome to the Tower of London. And today we're doing something slightly different for our tour. Today we're going to be talking about some tales from around the Tower of London. We won't be going inside the tower, but I will be showing you some amazing things from around the Tower of London, because this area is quite fantastic and phenomenal place to visit. Many people don't realize how cool it is. Many people just come for the Tower of London, but there's so many iconic and amazing items. And of course we're mainly going to focus on the tower, but I will show you a couple of things that are close to the area as well. First, in the distance there you can see the skyscraper that is Fenchurch Street. That is the walkie-talkie, where you have the Sky Garden at the top, and for entirely no money, except the money to travel here and everything. You don't need to buy tickets. You do need to book tickets, but they are free tickets. But for free, you can go to the Sky Garden, which is at the top, and get amazing views of London. And there's a beautiful garden there, so do remember that. But I've brought you to this little section for this wonderful church. This is All Hallows by the Tower, and it does claim to be the oldest church in the city of London. And let me tell you, you must visit this church, having been built around the year 675. Technically makes it the oldest church in the city of London, but although I would say St. Paul's has something to say about that. And of course, another interesting church that has something to say about that on the other side of the city of London is none other than Great St. Bartholomew's. But this church was built in the year 675, and if you ever do visit it, be sure to get the little guidebook. It's only £3, but it's wonderful. It's a wonderful souvenir guidebook. And over there you've got a lovely reflection of the Shard, tallest building in London. And the souvenir guidebook gives you a bit of the history. Welcome to this ancient church, founded in the year 675. As you enter our medieval walls, you're immediately transported to another world, with evidence that life and Christian faith have existed here since the Roman settlement of the 2nd century. And of course, when the Romans came in the 1st century, they actually did bring Christianity. It was part of their pantheon, their sort of collection of different gods and different beliefs. You also had the trial of the Templars here, connected to this place around 1311 in the 12th century. And in fact, you had a few bishops beheaded from this area, and it is quite a fascinating place. There was a fire and disaster in 1650 that struck All Hallows at 8 o'clock in the evening on Friday the 4th of January, and it was so terrible it destroyed a great part of history. But on the inside you have quite a lot of things that do survive, but one of the saddest stories is it was actually bombed during World War II by enemy action, and there is only a small part that survives, and one of the most impressive bits of the part that survives is on the inside. You get wonderful views of Tower Bridge and the Tower of London as we've come around All Hallows by the Tower over here, and we're just by the Tower Hill Terrace, technically in the city of London, but also technically in Tower Hamlets. But this is the Tower Terrace, and we get another lovely view of All Hallows by the Tower. But I do want to show you the interior of All Hallows by the Tower. It is simply gorgeous, and there are many different doors, entrances and exits. I will show you this one. I love this one because you do have a wonderful map by this particular entrance, and the doors are simply lovely. There you have it, All Hallows, oldest church in the city of London. As we come up over here, this entrance is simply magnificent. And right there you have the map, and it is here we have this wonderful map of old London, with London Bridge over there simply being called the Bridge. We have the mighty Thames, St. Paul's Church, if you ever wondered what St. Paul's Cathedral looked like before the Great Fire of 1666. There it is. Here we are. Inside All Hallows by the tower. You have a lot of memorials in All Hallows and sculptures. Lovely clock up over there with the moon face. And it is a simply beautiful church. As I mentioned, you must visit if you ever have the opportunity. But let's go downstairs. Now, this church was bombed during World War II by the Nazis and the enemy. And in fact, the only part that survives is just there. And here is the Saxon Arch. And this way takes us to the wonderful crypts. This is one of the most amazing hidden gems in London. You have Roman floors, a Roman mosaic, so much history here, and lots of chapels and memorials. And it's entirely free to visit, so I do recommend it. My favourite thing is this, the map of Roman London, model of Roman London, Londinium. How wonderful is that? We can see what Roman London used to look like. As you can see, there are numbers. There's a key of the numbers here. You have the barracks, the amphitheatre, the forum and basilica, Temple of Mithras, House and Bath, Bridge, Wall and Gates, Ludgate Hill, Tower of London, Tower Hill, Praetorium, River Fleet, River Walbrook, and the River Thames. So amazing just to see that. It is truly a wonderful, wonderful hidden gem of London. There we have reconstruction by Sir Charles Nicholas of Barking Abbey, whence All Hallows Barking by the Tower derives its name. That's from the year 1500. Missed this, the upper room at Talbot House. And it's a lovely chapel. But that's it, All Hallows by the Tower, simply beautiful. You must visit it, guys. Now, some of you may know the amazing diarist, the amazing author, writer and diarist of the 1600s, Samuel Pepys. And in fact, quite close to the tower, less than 3 minutes walk from the Tower of London, behind the Four Seasons Hotel, you actually have the statue of the great Samuel Pepys. So up over there you can see one of the doors to the Four Seasons, and before the door you have this bust of Samuel Pepys, the great diarist. And we know a lot about the Great Fire of London because of Samuel Pepys, but we also have a lot of information about the Restoration, the 1660s, etc., because of his meticulous diaries. So, Samuel Pepys used to keep very detailed, meticulous diaries of everything he did around London, and he knew a lot of people, a lot of famous people as well, and he was quite wealthy, so he had a lot of connections as well. Well, I say wealthy, but he was very well connected. And of course, the statue is in this location where the Four Seasons is, because it is in a building that used to be here, the site of the Navy office in which Samuel Pepys lived and worked, which sadly was destroyed by fire in 1673. But something even more amazing is that just over there, we're now on Seething Lane, Seethyng. And the street that goes off to the right there of Seething Lane is Pepys Street. But one of the most fantastic things about this little area is this church over here, St. Olaf's Church. And it's one of the many churches, we had about 6 in London, dedicated to St. Olaf. And St. Olaf is the Viking king and Viking saint. He was the first Christian king of Norway, and it was him fighting Canute that resulted in the legendary pulling down of London Bridge, which also contributed to the old song London Bridge is falling down, London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down, because the Vikings, when they were fighting for control of London, so Canute could become the first Danish king of England. Technically his father was the first Danish king of all England, but Canute wanted to be known as that as well. One of the things they did was pull down the old London Bridge, and we saw an image of the old London Bridge, which was simply called the bridge because there were no other bridges in London at the time. Here is St. Olaf's Church, named after St. Olaf. Some of the other churches are Olaf, O-L-A-F. And here we have a quote from Samuel Pepys, who came through this gate from the we have our own church, and Samuel Pepys came through this gate. One of my favourite quotes, though, is Dickens, The Uncommercial Traveller, "My best beloved churchyard, the churchyard of St. Ghastly Grim." And he called it that because of this wondrous memento mori that you see atop the entrance there, the 3 skulls and crossbones. And we can just walk in to have a quick look at the gardens of St. Olaf's Church. Another beautiful, this is St. Olaf Hart Street, and it dates back many centuries and has a rich history. The house of Sir Francis Walsingham, who is Queen Elizabeth I's spy master, actually stood nearby, and the Dyers Pepys lived here, and you have quite a few people buried here, including Samuel Pepys and his wife, and several others, including hundreds who died from the Great Plague of 1665. Dickens knew it very well, and sadly, like All Hallows by the Tower, this church was terribly destroyed by the Nazis. But this is a very beautiful, beautiful church, and this is the only one of the few medieval churches in the City of London to have escaped the Great Fire of London 1666. So this is a true piece of history with so many tales and so many wonderful things to discover. Now, what I love about this particular churchyard is, if you look over here, when I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, what are human beings that you are mindful of them, mortals that you care for them? So you've got psalms written all over the place, which is pretty cool. You've got another bit from the Bible there, and it is very nice. And they're always changing these things. So you can come and see a different little tale, different little piece, different little anecdote. But also, very importantly, when you come to look at the plants, you've got the names of the plants and little descriptors of the plants. Hyssopus officinalis, hyssop, the broth of hyssop made with figs, water, honey and rue. Drunken helpeth the inflammation of the lungs, the old cough that them can and them that cannot take their breath. So we can see the old medicines that were used by some of these trees. We've got the myrtle tree, Myrtus communis. If you put the seed into wine, it will be good for them that have weak brains, to save them from drunkenness. It saveth the hair that falleth off. So these little descriptors of the plants and what they were believed to do, or what some of them do actually do, is quite fantastic. And one of my favourite bits, the last thing I'll show you from St. Olaf's Church, Hart Street, is this wonderful floor. How lovely is that? It's a kind of maze, so you can come and walk through the maze here at St. Olaf's Hart Street. Now, if you're looking for a place to have a drink, there are countless places that I can heartily recommend. Once again, you have the Sky Garden over there. There's a lovely bar at the top of the Sky Garden, and pretty much almost every pub in the area I can heartily recommend. But if you want one with a very interesting name, a somewhat macabre name, then you must come here on Great Tower Street to the Hung, Drawn and Quartered pub. It is a very lovely pub, nice interior, not as big as many of the other pubs, and it's a Fuller's Ale and Pie. And in fact here we can see a griffin. Fuller's have the griffin as part of their coat of arms. But it is a very lovely pie, and if you follow me this way, the reason I say you must come here, especially if you're interested in all things macabre, Samuel Pepys, as we mentioned, lived just down the road, over there in fact. Samuel Pepys, if you go over there and make the first left, you'll get to where Pepys lived and to his church where he is buried. Over here in the window we got a lovely reflection of All Hallows by the tower, but we're looking for this because Samuel Pepys lived in the area and he knew a lot about the area, and we have this quote from Samuel Pepys: "I went to see Major General Harrison, hung, drawn and quartered. He was looking as cheerful as any man could in that condition." And that is from the diary of Samuel Pepys on the 13th of October in the year 1660. So cool, I do like that pub. But as I mentioned, there are so many other pubs. You've got the Dickens Inn and many other fantastic places. And the Tower and Tower Bridge are over in view today. As we turn around here, as I mentioned, so many lovely pubs. You've got the Four Seasons Hotel again, but there is the Traitor's Gate pub right there. But we're going to turn into this bit, the Trinity Square Gardens, which are quite lovely. And you have a lot of our naval memorials from the two great wars in Trinity Square Gardens, with a lot of the names of the Merchant Navy and the Navy, of our people who lost their lives, and memorials and the like. So there's quite a bit of history in the area over here, as we can see right there. And there you've got 1914 to 1918, World War I, and the inscription: "The 20,000 of merchant navy and fishing fleets whose names are honoured on the walls of this garden gave their lives for their country. They have no grave but the sea." And if we come down in this section over here by this memorial, one thing I really like is the sort of sea beings that are put over here, and it is quite nice just to see the mermen and mermaids all across here, and different beings of the oceans. Of course, very naval memorials here. And one thing I really like is this guy over here, and he might remind you of Neptune or Poseidon. And it's pretty cool that he's pointing up, because look at what he's pointing up at. That fella over there, and we'll talk about that fella later on. But here's another mermaid, or rather siren, over there, and it is quite brilliant. So you've got different deities and mythical beings, and there's a lot of mythical and magical history to London and the area around the Tower of London. And in fact, a lot of people, there's a popular misconception that people were mainly executed within the Tower of London, behind the memorial over there. But in fact, most people were executed around this area and not within the Tower of London. Only very important political and royal individuals were executed within the Tower of London. So that's one bit of history a lot of people don't realise. But the history dates back to even longer, and in fact, have a look up over there. You see that fella who looks like Neptune or Poseidon, or one of the many different sea deities? That is none other than Old Father Thames. A lot of people will say it's Neptune or Poseidon, but we're quite close to the River Thames. The Thames is actually on the other side of the Tower of London, and more often than not, whenever you are close to the Thames, the statues of sea deities or sea beings are those of Old Father Thames. And Old Father Thames is believed to be the god of the River Thames by some, or was believed to be the god of the River Thames by some. And in fact, all the rivers had their own little gods. which is quite a fascinating thing. Of course, the Druids, and you still have Druids having ceremonies here at the tower, but the Druids used to worship the rivers and the trees, and they would get their magic from nature, and it is quite a fascinating thing. And speaking of magic, this is actually where we start our amazing witches and witchcraft history tour. So be sure to look out for the witches and witchcraft history tour if you want to find out more about this area. And it's up over here next to Tower Hill Station. So that is the station that you can get to come here, and you get one of the best views of the Tower of London from here. There's one very important thing that I want to show you after I've shown you the lovely view over here. So there's the wonderful view of the Tower of London. But if we turn around, you've got this sundial with the times over there, and it gives you a timeline of London. So here we're in 1866, so we're going to do a circuit back to 1866. We've got the monument there. We're going backwards in time, 1829, 1657, 1642, 1605, the Gunpowder Plot, 1598, the Globe on the other side of the river. As we continue, 1349, the Black Death over there. And as we continue, 1066, the Tower of London was founded when William the Conqueror came. As we continue around this way, you've got the Roman conquest, London founded around AD 50 and 55. Around AD 60, you get so many different dates, the first London Bridge was built. Got London and the River Thames, AD 43 to 92, when this was unveiled. Then here, 1975 to 82, 1952. We've got the Blitz during the Second World War, which we mentioned earlier. We've got the Brook Bray, Edwin Russell, sort of a taxi there. General Chitty, as they called it. And we've got the firefighters, the London Fire Brigade over there. And we're slowly coming back to where we started going around the circuit. 1863 with the Metropolitan line being founded, and there we're back where we started. Well, we've just gone over, but we've got the Houses of Parliament and Big Ben right there, all the way down river, or upriver. Now, one of the most amazing things about the area around the Tower of London is the example of old Roman and medieval London. And as we look at this wall, which almost looks like it's nothing at all, this in fact is the old part of the old city walls that survive. And the city walls were built by the Romans some 1,800 years ago. And of course they built these walls to protect Londinium, which is what they called London. We call it London today. But these walls were built around 200 AD, making them some 1,800 years old. And in fact, most of what we're looking at is not even Roman. Most of what we're looking at is in fact medieval, because after the fall of Roman London, the Romans left, but the Londoners, people we call Londoners at any rate, continue to use London, and the Saxons continue to use the city, and in fact they continue to use the walls. Even before the Saxons, people who wanted to protect themselves from the Saxon raids continued to use these old Roman walls. When the Saxons were coming, or whichever enemy was coming in, they would come to behind the city walls to protect themselves. But these walls were falling apart. They were greatly dilapidated. So around the medieval period, which depending on which historians you're looking at, or what period of history you're looking at, is either the year 500 to the year 1500, or 1066 to the 1480. So you've got two versions of medieval London. But the medieval London certainly from around the Saxon time, the Londoners from around the Saxon times, they continued to add to the wall and repair the wall, so that most of what we actually see here is medieval as opposed to actually being Roman. However, because the Romans actually built that first wall, we do have this statue of the Roman Emperor Trajan or Trajan. Not sure how you pronounce his name, but you can see it written right over here. Statue believed to be of the Roman Emperor Trajan, AD 98 to 117, Imperator Kaiser Nerva Trajanus Augustus, presented to by the Tower Hill Improvement Trust at the request of the Reverend R.B. Clayton, founder of Padre of TOHC. And there's so much history, but if we consider the medieval history, down here you have a wonderful depiction of the history of the Tower of London in a medieval style, and it is a modern artistic rendition of the history. I'm not a big fan of modern art, if I am being honest, but you do sometimes get some wonderful modern art, and here we have Stephen B. Watley's depiction of the history of the Tower of London. Of course, in the Tower of London you can find the crown jewels and several other things, but it all begins with William the Conqueror and his conquest in 1066. And the Tower of London was founded by the Duke of Normandy, William the Conqueror, who would become William I, reigning from 1066 to 1087. And he needed a castle in London to impose his control in the city and protect himself from attack. And this painting is inspired by the Bayeux tapestry, which tells the story of the Norman conquest. And in fact, we have my favourite king in English history right here, the great Charles II, or the naughty Charles II. Now, Charles II was married, and depending on the historian you believe, he had either 13 or 14 mistresses, girlfriends on the side. Henry VIII had nothing on Charlie Boy over there, and I'm going to tell you a bit more about him in connection with the Ravens of the Tower of London later on. But here I will tell you a little bit about the legend of the Ravens of the Tower of London in connection to Charles II, my favourite king in English history. Here we have Henry III, who's been nicknamed Henry the Builder. He reigned from 1216 to 1277, and because he was a great builder, he was nicknamed the Great Builder. And he not only reconstructed the walls of the Tower of London, he did the same for Windsor Castle and Westminster Abbey, among many other buildings, hence the nickname Henry the Builder. And in fact, he converted Windsor Castle, Tower of London and Westminster Abbey from wood and mortar to stone. Here we have good Queen Bess, the great Elizabeth I, who often, although this year she didn't make it, but she's often considered the greatest monarch of England, because we didn't have a United Kingdom of Great Britain when she was alive. But that is Elizabeth I, the daughter of Anne Boleyn. And Anne Boleyn was in fact executed at the Tower of London right there. And she was accused of several things, including witchcraft. She was found innocent of witchcraft, but she had been accused of witchcraft. Eventually she would be found guilty of treason by way of adultery, cheating on the king. And the king was none other than the notorious Henry VIII, with his 6 wives, two of him whom were beheaded here, Anne Boleyn being one of them. And it is quite a fascinating place. Now, it is believed that Anne Boleyn is one of the few people to have actually been beheaded within the walls of the Tower of London, because as I mentioned earlier, many people were in fact executed at Tower Hill, where we were earlier, where you've got Tower Hill Station, where we have come from. But this is the magnificent Tower of London. Now they're just removing the amazing sort of a summer exhibition they had over here, which hopefully should be an ongoing exhibition, and it was none other than Super Bloom. Did any of you get to see the Super Bloom here at the Tower of London? It was simply magnificent. Now, the tower was used as a fortress and once protected weapons, documents, silver coins that were made here more than 500 years ago. And in the 1660s, Charles II was the first king to display the crown jewels publicly at the Tower of London. And here you have a bit of the castle defences. So the castle took a long time to actually build. The first tower was the White Tower. All the other towers were added afterwards, but kings and queens added to this castle over many centuries, and you can explore centuries of history right here at the Tower of London. Now, as we go along this little path leading to St. Catherine's Docks, you can see a lovely reflection of the Shard in that building over there. But one thing I really love here is a wonderful photo opportunity of Tower Bridge. You get a lovely little sliver of Tower Bridge coming up into view now. Look at that, with all the rosemary. If you come at the right time, the scent of rosemary is simply amazing over here. You also have some sage, purple sage here, which is quite interesting, especially because I do a witches tour. But have a look at this lovely view. And there you have it, the Tower Bridge. Now in the distance there, you can see a lovely silhouette of the sun behind the Shard, which is quite nice. But it is from around here where we get one of my favourite views of the Tower of London, because around here you can get a view of almost the entirety of this side of the Tower of London, depending on the camera you use, of course. But look at that, how gorgeous is that? And it is here that I'd like to tell you about the legend of the ravens, because it is said if the ravens ever depart the tower will crumble and all of England will fall. And do any of you believe in that particular legend? I don't know if it's real or not, but there is believed to be magic protecting the tower, that Charles II, whom we saw earlier, believed this so much he petitioned the government to create a statute, a kind of law, saying there should never be less than 6 ravens. And those are gulls, not ravens, but there should never be less than 6 ravens in the Tower of London. And to this very day, they maintain that they keep at least 7 ravens, 6 and a spare. So they always ensure that they have at least 7 ravens, which is pretty cool. And why do they believe this? Well, it is believed to be connected to an old Welsh or Celtic king named Bran Hen. And Bran Hen used to fight the enemy when they were the foreigners, when they were trying to invade, as they called them at the time, usually the French, when they were trying to invade. And make sure you pay attention to the building with the Union flag, the Union Jack over there, because that's the White Tower, which was actually the first tower to be built and the official Tower of London. But at any rate, whenever the French tried to invade, or sometimes the Scots tried to invade, depending on the legend you're reading, it was said Bran Hen fought them so well and defeated them every time, beat them back. And some people believe that he may have used magic, according to a couple of different legends, of course, and he may have used magic. However, in one battle, he was fatally wounded. He was mortally wounded, and he was about to die. He knew that he was dying, and he actually asked some of his soldiers to behead him. And he told them, cut my head off and bury it in London at White Hill. White Hill is the location where they would build none other than the White Tower that we see with the Union flag over there. And in fact, it was said that Bran Hen advised his soldiers to take the head to London so that it could be buried there at the Tower of London. It was quite a fascinating thing. Bran Hen was also known as Bran the Blessed, and he said, according to legend, "And take you my head," said he, "and bear it unto the White Mount in London, and bury it there with the face towards French, and a long time you will be upon the road. In Harlech or Harlech, you will be feasting 7 years. The birds of Rhiannon are singing unto you the while, and all that time the head will be to you as pleasant company as it ever was on my body. And at Gwales in Penfro you will be 80 years, and you may remain there, and the head with you uncorrupted, until you open the door that looks towards Aber Henvelin and towards Cornwall. And after you open that door, there you may no longer tarry. Set forth then to London and bury the head, and go straight forward. And that's part of the legend of Bran Hen. So they would eventually, after all those years of travelling, they would eventually bury the head here on the Tower of London. And this is perhaps one of the reasons there was a castle built here, to sort of have that tradition, because the guardians, there are the monarchs, the rulers, mostly kings and some queens, were considered to be guardians of the country. And this is perhaps where the legend comes from. And in fact, in Welsh, Bran actually means raven. So when ravens started coming to the place where Bran Hen's head, or Bran the Blessed's head, was buried, people started thinking it was evidence of magic. And in fact, the sole remaining evidence or trace of Bran's legend at the Tower of London are these said ravens, because his name Bran means raven. And in fact, Bran and King Arthur of legend had been talismans to ward off the Saxon incursion, and they were used again in order to rally the Welsh against the Normans when William the Conqueror was invading. So it is quite a fascinating thing. And we have a very interesting legend connected, or story rather, connected to the chief and most lamented of many of the Welsh leaders, and his name was Llewellyn II. Apologies, my Welsh is terrible, but Llewellyn II, whose own father Griffith was killed attempting to escape from the Tower, Llewellyn proclaimed himself Pendragon, the Pendragon of Wales, which was a notable title in the light of his subsequent demise. He was actually defeated, then executed on the 11th of December 1282, and they actually brought his skull and placed it on the battlements of the Tower of London in unconscious imitation of a more ancient story, like the head of Bran the Blessed. And it is actually said that they actually paraded the head from here to Westminster because it was a mockery of the old Arthurian or Merlin prediction that a Welsh king would actually parade through London. So they paraded Llewellyn II's head on a spike through the city of London. So it was quite a sad thing. Now I'm going to tell you in a few moments, once we get past the crowds and get a lovely view of the River Thames, about another prediction or prophecy by Merlin, the Wizard of Oz, the Arthurian legend and legendary wizard. It is Christmas time as I'm making the video, so you can see the Tower of London Christmas tree is now out, and the tower is hustling and bustling. And from here, we are going to get our view of, our first proper view rather, of Tower Bridge with the Christmas tree over there. So there is the very lovely Tower Bridge. How wonderful is that? What is everyone's favourite bridge? Now, as we get closer to this amazing view of Tower Bridge, I will read to you from this book, The Secret Law of London, foreword by Ian Sinclair and edited by John Matthew with Caroline Wise, because this is the prophecy connected to Llewellyn II, and it's a prophecy connected, about the Tower of London. It's a prophecy from the wizard Merlin, who was also considered to be a druid. Then shall a tree spring upon the top of the Tower of London. It will be content with only 3 branches, and yet it will overshadow the whole length and breadth of the land. With the spread of its leaves, the north wind will come as the tree's enemies. and with its noxious breath will tear away the third of the branches. The two branches which are left will occupy the place of the one ripped off, this until one of them destroys the other by the very abundance of its leaves. This last branch will fill the place of the other two, and it will offer a roosting place to birds come from foreign parts. The birds native to the country will see it will see it as harmful, for through their dread of its shadow, they will lose their power of flight. And this obscure prophecy has actually been seen by many as referring to the Hanoverian monarchy. The last branch, of course, refers to Queen Victoria, whose numerous offspring intermarried with every royal house in Europe, making the entire royal families of Europe one massive family, with many of them marrying cousins, sometimes even blood cousins, much like Queen Victoria herself, who married her first cousin, Prince Albert. But of course, when I read that particular prophecy from Merlin, it brings to mind the wonderful stories of J.R.R. Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings, with that magnificent tree growing on the tower. That just reminds me of the tree of Gondor. If you remember the movies or the books, there's the tree of Gondor, and there's that legend that if the last leaf ever falls, with many different trees actually in the Lord of the Rings, if the last leaf ever falls, the country will fall. And of course, birds from foreign lands would come to the tower to seek shade and shelter in this tree, which of course is the ravens once again. Ravens were seen as messengers as well. There's a lot of sort of raven stories in the Lord of the Rings as well. But also that tree is quite brilliant because its enemy, according to Merlin, would be the north wind. And its noxious fumes, noxious, toxic, poison fumes, that just reminds me of Mordor. Now, I must mention that the north wind, of course, would, as name suggests, come from the north, but Mordor was in fact in the south. But J.R.R. Tolkien, if you are a fan of the Lord of the Rings, was greatly inspired by the ancient Celtic traditions and myths and the old Arthurian legends and so many wonderful things like that. But there you have it, some tales from the Tower of London. I have just one last tale to tell you guys, and it is of this, the St. Thomas Tower, because by the St. Thomas Tower you have a very interesting gate. Do any of you recognize this little ditty? Remember, remember, the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. I know of no reason the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. That is, of course, referring to the traitors of the Gunpowder Plot in 1605, who plotted to blow up the Houses of Parliament when King James I was within at the opening of Parliament on the 5th of November 1605. But of course, that plot was foiled, they were captured and they were arrested. And if you were being brought to the Tower, because as well as a place of execution and a mint and a royal castle or palace, it was also used as a prison. And if you came as a traitor, this is how you would enter the Tower of London. You'd be brought by boat, sometimes from the Houses of Parliament, sometimes from other locations, and you would be made to enter the notorious Tower of London via the Traitor's Gate. But there you have it, a wonderful view of the White Tower, where Bran the Blessed, Game of Thrones anyone, Bran Hen, is buried to protect London. And of course, if you consider Bran is the Welsh word for raven, and if you know your Game of Thrones mythology, Bran is the three-eyed raven in Game of Thrones. How cool is that? But I've been Vincent. Hope you've enjoyed this mini tour, slightly different tales from the Tower of London. And of course, finally, a huge fire destroyed the tower's grand storehouse in 1841, but it has since been rebuilt. I've been Vincent. Do have a lovely, I hope you've enjoyed this mini tour, and do have a lovely rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, etc., wherever you are. And these were tales from the tower, around the Tower of London. Bye.